straight down, then the sun comes out,
Okay.
and that's that.
The brush picks up the snow?
Yeah, so we use a snow blower and get it down to nothing, and then the brush
And you also use the brush.
clears it. And they don't even, the maintenance guys so far have ignored the idea that they should be salty.
Right.
They just like, it's so clear. Up, showtime.
So everyone,
John, Radnor Library is your partner this evening. My name is Pam Sador, and I do adult events here, and this is your first time here. I'm really happy that you're here, and I've met John and Dan and Carol, and we'll meet later on, but thank you for coming. I'm looking forward to this.
hello, welcome to the EAC lecture series, Radnor Township Environmental Advisory Council. We have given lectures over the past 2 years regarding environmental concerns in our area. And a very timely one is road salt and our drinking water, as well as the health of our streams. And Dr. John Davidson is a scientist. You're
Stroud Water Research Center.
yeah, at Stroud Water Research Center, and they have been mobilizing for about several years volunteers to sample streams in southeast Pennsylvania, both during the dry season to get kind of a baseline level of salt content in our streams, and also at times like this when we're applying salt and there's a greater chance of it running off into our streams and increasing the concentration of sodium and chloride. So John is going to talk about this issue, and we very much welcome him. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you guys, New Venture for, and this is my first time here, and I've done this shtick in a lot of places, but never the headwaters up here, never in Radnor, so that's great. You guys, samples that I'll talk about from your area came out of Willistown Conservation Trust. A friend of mine has guided the sampling up in this area. I'm going to talk to you about winter salt, but first thing is winter salt is only when we apply it. You will see it's a year-round issue. It never goes away. And it's a challenge for our infrastructure. It's a challenge for our drinking water. It's a challenge for the environment. Not one, all three, all the time. And those are the hidden costs. One of the tricks when you talk about road salt is the terms and the terminology. And the more people you talk to, the different terms. Tonight I'm going to talk about electrical conductivity or specific conductance. That's the ability of electricity to go through the water. More salt, more conductivity. And the second thing I'm going to talk to you about is chloride. We now have this quick and dirty measurement of chloride. Before we had to ship things to a really nice lab to get a number. Now a volunteer can do it in a matter of minutes. And the accuracy is really quite good. What we're doing is measuring salts. With the conductivity meter, there's all sorts of salts that go into solution naturally and from us. One that's most common is calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate, limestone. You go just north of here, Valley Creek, there's more limestone, and you'll see that then you can shake a stick at. Our geology is so complicated. You need to know what your geology is as you're working in our area. Maybe less so for something as small as this township. But at the county level, Delaware County, Chester County, you go over a hill and your geology changes. It's amazing. Most of our road salt is sodium chloride. It's table salt. When we dissolve it, it dissolves to a cation. The sodium is freed from the anion, the chloride. This is what you're really doing, is you're taking this solid, you add water, and your sodium and your chloride separate out and get surrounded by these water molecules. They're in solution. They dissolve. It happens naturally. This is an illustration. This could be Valley Creek. Highly soluble bedrock because of the limestone water working its way through. There's massive flow pathways, but what you end up with is hard water. Lots of calcium, lots of magnesium in solution. You go a little north, a little south, especially you go into glaciated areas, you have soft water. Pennsylvania is loaded with soft water if you go north. These are all sites in the Delaware that we have had friends put conductivity meters in. All of these four are, this is background. This is not a road salt problem. So naturally, we see conductivities between less than 50 to over 300 in Pennsylvania. The more limestone, higher it is. Now, Valley Creek at this point is at 800. That's road salt. That's what's going on there. The key to this, and keep this in mind, is these differences are natural, except for the valley, and they may be ecologically important. And they're ecologically important because the primary pathway for salt to affect us, animals, is water balance, osmoregulation. We all did this in high school. You prick your finger, put some red blood cells on a slide, and then you challenge it. If you challenge it with a buffer that matches our normal chemistry, water in and water out is equal. If you put it into salty water, the salt water dries the water out, you shrivel up your red blood cells. You put it into deionized water or distilled water, the water rushes into the cell and blows it up. Just pops it because it can't stop it. This is all being done passively. This is a map that shows you how our salt problems or our natural trends are changing. Anything that's red and yellow and orange, these are all areas where salinity is increasing across the United States. Our area played a big role in this and people ignored it. This is a data set that Chris Crockett and Interlandi put together. It was published 2003. It was data from the 73 to 99, 26 years. They looked at sodium and chloride. Remember, these are sodium, a health concern, doubled in a 26-year period. This should have been a big red flag. This is right at the water intake for Philadelphia. This is a big river, the Schuylkill. Kind of fell on deaf ears. 2 years later, some colleagues of ours copied that study, but they went to Baltimore, up to the Hudson, the drinking water supply of Baltimore. These are guys that were a little more savvy, put it in the proceedings of the academy, and more than 30 years after some really important things were published about road salt, this one got the attention. People ignored it up until this time in terms of you and me. This is what it actually looks like on the landscape. This is road salt use in the United States going back to 1940. So if you were to ask your parents or your grandparents or whomever, what did road salt use look like in the 40s? They would say we didn't do it, because we really didn't. It jumped up in the 70s, jumped up again in the mid-90s. At this point, we're using 55 billion pounds per year. In Pennsylvania, I think we use about 400 pounds of road salt per person. So if you're in a 4-person house, you're talking about 1,200 pounds of road salt applied to the roadways for you, your house alone. This is road salt in streams around here that we have some old data on. So this is White Clay Creek at the Stroud Center. 2 roads, almost no road salt use. Chloride concentration's about 12. It has not changed since we started collecting data in '68. Most of what's going on there, I think, is probably mushroom compost. Most people don't realize mushroom compost, they put rock salt in mushroom compost. So it causes some increase in salinity, but next to nothing. This is the Brandywine at Chadds Ford. I like the Brandywine at Chadds Ford because we have data back to the 40s. This is Valley Creek at Valley Forge National Park, the USGS data. This goes back to the early 60s. All of these old data that are out there tell me that our background was between 5 and 10 milligrams per liter chloride. Very little salt, naturally. Valley Forge is now at 150, Brandywine's at 50. What does it mean? This has gone up 30-fold. This has gone up 10-fold. White Clay, which is rural, hasn't changed at all. It's the only difference is the amount of roads and parking lots. Remember, the watershed area is a watershed area. The key to it is how much hardscaping do you have that you applied road salt to? And you think about this, 202, the Turnpike, King of Prussia Mall, the Valley Forge industrial complex in there, all of those office buildings and everything.
All the paving.
And the timing, if I go back, the Valley Forge or Valley Creek mirrors the national pattern. And that makes sense because it's the most urbanized. The use was parallel. So now it's not a problem of the Delaware, it's not a problem of the Schuylkill, it's not a problem of Southeast PA. We now refer to the Salt Belt, which is Virginia to Maine and over to the Dakotas. These are the states that apply the most salt. I got that term actually from a truck company about 10 years ago. They called it the Salt Belt because their business was rust prevention. So they created a version of that map. That map I just showed you out of Wikipedia because I can't find the old, but this was a rust preventing company. This was an eye-opener. I found this about 2 years ago. I don't know why it took me so long to find it. 1970, it's a report out of the National Academy of Science, National Academy of Engineering. What are they looking at? Effect of de-icing salts on water quality and biota. They wanted to know what was known. These were smart guys. And they saw piles, and they saw trucks, and they knew that this is a pollutant. What do we know? Because in 1970, they were applying much more than they had, say, 20 years ago, before that, 1950. Well, that may have been a red flag, but the only people that paid attention were scientists, because a bunch of scientists were looking. So I just threw up some early papers, 71, 72, so I highlighted the years, and some keywords: runoff, de-icing, effect, street salting, water pollution, groundwater contamination. In 72, road salt, effects of road salt, de-icing salts. They knew. This is all academic research. A lot of it out of Canada or out of the Northeast. It was so easy to find because salts nothing uses it. And so we can measure it easily. And yet, you didn't hear about it. I didn't hear about it. Ruth Patrick's groundwater book, this came out in '83, second edition in '87, mentions road salt in several places as a groundwater contaminant, which means long-term problems. It was referred to as non-disposal sources due to human activities. In other words, it wasn't permitted. It wasn't coming out of a pipe. It was people doing people things. Just like spreading manure goes into the groundwater and is a problem, just like anything else. But it was us. I finally found someone actually paying attention to this and produced a basic map of groundwater and stream water pollution. This is out of Guelph. It's a groundwater company out of Canada. And you notice this is all about pollution. This is all about us, ag and urban, but they focus on the groundwater. And one of the things they highlight here is chloride, road salt, contaminating the groundwater. I mean, they've got the usual things, nutrients and pesticides and septic leaks and sewage and industrial, all the stuff you would normally talk about, but they chose to red flag road salt because it's everywhere. So how do we get salt in our waterways? Stormwater runoff, wastewater. In other words, we have salty diets, our drinking water is salty. All of that goes through the wastewater treatment plant. That treats nothing when it comes to salt. Goes into the stream. And then we have a groundwater component. I got introduced to the road salt way back, as far as I can tell, because I wasn't really paying attention. In '99, I was working in the Schuylkill, and I had a bunch of sites across the Schuylkill Basin. And my best predictor, and I'll show this data in a second, was conductivity. Degradation and conductivity matched. Higher the conductivity, more degraded the stream. Then EPA brought us in to look at mountaintop mining in West Virginia. Different salt, that's calcium carbonate. When they do the valley fill, so this is all virgin rock, blasted out of the mountain, pushed into the stream. There's a stream underneath there. When it comes out, very high conductivity. Instead of 100, it's 3,000. It's a lot of dissolved salts, but a different one. But there are no mayflies, sensitive species, below the valley fill. And we did some bioassays. We couldn't kill them, but they weren't happy. They slowed down because they're spending all their energy trying to balance the salt. And then DRBC brought us in to do some toxicity work on Marcellus shale produced water. Elevated sodium chloride, elevated carbonates, really elevated, super salty. This did kill them, just like if you put them in ocean water, it would kill them, because there's just so much salt. This is very, very salty because, and most people don't realize it, Marcellus shale is old ocean bed. So when they frack it, when they fracture it with water, all of that salt down there goes into solution, and then it comes up through the well and you have to dispose of it. These are the data I told you out of the Schuylkill. This is 157 sites. This is a bug metric, so 20 is a great site, 0 is a real stinker. This is conductivity. It's a pretty nice fit. There's two good predictors of stream degradation: percent forest and conductivity. The thing that to keep in mind is this conductivity up here is not that's only 85 milligrams chloride, which is next to nothing, as I'll show you. But in other words, we draw the line around 50 milligrams. That's this area here. The trick is to remember. I've seen this pattern. I've seen it in the Schuylkill. I've seen it in the headwaters of the Delaware, New York City drinking water watersheds. I've seen it in the Delaware River Watershed Initiative. You give me 100 sites, I'm going to find this pattern if it's a gradient from wildlands to urban. But correlation doesn't equal causation. Salt's a great predictor, but it's not the only stressor, and I'll end with that later. Where's all this salt coming from? I mentioned this before we got started. Parking lots in municipalities. This is New Hampshire. The combination is 80% from those two sources. Notice the proportion though, over half are parking lots. This is a similar data set out of Chicago and the surrounding areas of Chicago. 72% private or municipal, but it's reversed. So their budget said there was more salt on the municipal roads than there was on the private parking lots. How is that? I'm not sure. Is it a philosophy? I don't know. You know, nobody records how private applicators operate. There's just almost no data. But what are those two things? Municipalities and private landowners, they're local. Local. The decision to salt has nothing to do with Harrisburg. It has nothing to do with Washington. It has to do with your municipality and the guy who owns the parking lot at the Giant and who he contracts with to de-ice his property. So we started working with the public because they're the owners, they're the voters, they're the taxpayers, they are also the planners, the protectors, and the fixers. And this is the problem that we asked for and we paid for it, and there's no way we're gonna fix it without public support. Any of you who remember the 90s know how many politicians lost their jobs between 93 and 96, big storms, because the next election was, the only promise you needed to say was, I'll do road maintenance better than my opponent. And it's like, out with the old and in with the new. The thing is those were some monster storms, and road salt was the least of our worries because you had 20 or 30 inches of snow and nowhere to put it. That's a whole different problem. Our problem with salt is storm after storm after storm. So we started asking questions, being scientists. Where is it elevated? When is it elevated? And can the salt be reduced? That question is not really on us. That's me coming out to talk to you. A lot has changed since the late nineties, early 2000s, and my ability to use a conductivity meter is the same as it always has been, but I can buy one for 80 bucks, and I can buy a chloride strip for 2 bucks. I used to have to pay $20 for a chloride measurement if I went to a private lab. That's a lot of money. We have groups that do 100 sites. Where are they gonna get that kind of money? 2 bucks? I can give them that. So we're using chloride because that's what road salt is measured as easily. It's not the stressor, just so you know. I think the stressor is sodium, potassium, magnesium. It's the cation, not the anion, not the chloride. And the science backs that up. Sodium chloride, sodium's very neutral. Magnesium and potassium, they're negative. They behave more like a toxin. And then we have conductivity, and what's the difference? Why do we do this? Specific conductance allows me to QA the data. We're dealing with volunteers, we're dealing with non-trained scientists, asking them to help us understand local issues, their backyards. First thing that happens when they think they found a problem is someone will say, you don't know what you're doing. By having 2 measurements, we can look for outliers, and we can clean the data, and we can retest a site. We can retest the sample. That means the volunteers can do just like I do, and they've done a great job. The conductivity is just about ions in solution and electricity flowing through. If I put the conductivity meter in distilled water, no salts, no conductivity, no light bulb. Electricity won't pass through it. If I put it in dry salt, no conductivity. Electricity won't pass through, no lit up light bulb. Add the 2 together, water and salt. Electricity pass through, light bulb goes on. This is the relationship if I take distilled water and add table salt. The fit here, 0.99, this thing so lines up. It is so conservative. So if you think you've got a real number, I have 2 ways of checking it. Those are the data I just showed you. These are the data that from the field. Look at how similar they are. These are field samples out of the stream, because once I get out of this area here, everything else there is road salt. These are real sites where we've worked with partners. This is where geology makes a difference, and it gets a little noisy. After that, we're just talking about road salt. Remember, I said this earlier. Natural around here is going to be 100 to 300, maybe 400. After that, you're at road salt. So if I have an outlier up here or down here, then I can go retest it again and say what's going on. One of the things about road salt is it basically is just hijacking and riding along in our water cycle. And no one thinks about it that way. But this is so true of a lot of our pollutants. And it helps you understand it. So here's the Pennsylvania water cycle. 41 inches on average, rain, precipitation, snow. 21 inches goes back up, evapotranspiration. Just evaporates, goes back into the air. So that's half. Half of your rain is lost. Then 7 inches goes into quick runoffs, that's your storm. But twice as much goes into recharge, especially in the winter. If you've ever played around or had your own well, you realize that well depth plummets during the summer and rises during the winter. Recharge is going to be December, January, February, March, because the plants aren't growing. So the water goes straight through the soils and back into the groundwater. 64% of the stream floor, and this is just out of this number, in Pennsylvania is groundwater. If it hasn't rained in a few days, all the water you're looking at in some little stream around here is groundwater. It's coming out of springs, it's coming out of seeps. It cannot rain for 10 days, 20 days, 60 days. You still have water there. It's all groundwater. Road salt enters here in the storm runoff and here through the groundwater, going down. This is an early site. This is down by the Concord Mall on 202 in Delaware. It's also right next to the First State National Historic Park. We put in a bunch of sensors down there, started in 2017. Winter, summer, winter, summer. The winters are variable, the summers are not. And your first glance at this is, oh, all the salt leaves. But we knew better, because what's different here, this is one of the first places we measured salt water in the stream that was equal to salt water in the ocean. This spike right here is about what you would get in the ocean. Conductivity of 45,000. We've measured that north of Philly. We've measured that around Westchester. I don't think it's uncommon at all. You just give me a small stream tied to a bunch of roads and parking lots, and I mean small. And it's gonna spike on an ice event. You notice it doesn't always hit that. It's all about the weather and how they treat during that weather event. So they over-treat, we get very little precipitation, and the water that runs off is salty, salty, salty. Because they don't change, they're expecting the worst. But you're asking anything that lives in that water to deal with, you've evolved to live in fresh water, and you're thrown into the ocean. Even if it's only for 6 hours, you're not gonna be happy. So then we said, okay, it's very temporally variable. What about spatially? Because we can't put sensors everywhere, they're way too much work. So we decided to put people to work, because we thought, okay, let's see if we can get more data. So we worked with the TTF, great watershed association. This is unique in that the upper TTF is on the surface in Montgomery County, then it hits Philadelphia, and everything except for the main stem is underground. So the only place you can figure anything out is down here, but then it's too late and you got the CSOs and everything else. So all of the data are up there. Then we worked with Valley Forge TU, and then the Stroud Center with a bunch of colleagues really amped things up. The Master Watershed Stewards in Chester County, Westchester University. We got 100 sites in January 2023, 3 years ago. When we look at the data, what I've done is just plotted all those sites from highest to lowest. And I plotted two lines here. One is the EPA standard from '88, and the lower one is an indicator of stress adopted by Maryland and Ohio. So they didn't define it as a criteria, they just said in streams that we find impaired, salt is a factor if salt is over 50 milligrams per liter, which remember is 10 times background. All three of these had sites that were above the EPA standard, independent of being in a storm. This was October, no storm, no road salt applied for months. This was November, this was early January, there had been no winter events in 2023. So it was groundwater. It was just coming out August, September, October, November, December, January. It's always there. If we use the Ohio and Maryland indicator, almost every site was stressed by salt. Almost every one. So we were successful in really opening our eyes about all the places that are involved in this. It's everywhere. And nobody's surprised when people start collecting this, because they've watched road salt get applied in front of their house every year since they were conscious of road salting. But it had to go somewhere. And now we can measure where it went. So we asked the question, can we use volunteers to really beef this up? Because the first time I talked in Westchester, for example, I talked to the Westchester COG. And 7 municipalities, really great group. It's really hard. What do we do? This is going to require a lot of municipalities joining forces. It's hard to tell people we're doing something wrong, especially when we keep paying for it and we keep demanding it. So I understand, and the only way I know to help is to bring more voices to the table so no one feels like they're standing alone. So that meant going more places because it's local. And it's impossible to use sensors, we have to figure out a way to engage the public. So last year, as part of Winter Salt Week, which by the way is going on again right now, we decided in the last day to up our effort, and we started reaching out to people. We were able to sample 600 sites. We had 30 groups. We had 300 participants out collecting samples. Here's what it looked like. We did really well out here because we had connections. We knew we needed to work our way west. But what did the data tell us? The data told us, this is the EPA standard, 21% of our sites in January during a storm event exceeded it. 71% were above the Maryland and Ohio indicators during a winter storm, during winter base flow, depends on the site. The thing that was interesting to us is we were trying to get people to go smaller and smaller. And one of the things you notice is look at some of these values. We had some really high salts, as in 9,000, 10,000. We had to bring samples back and get better conductivity meters, and we had to get different ways of measuring, because nobody had expected this kind of salt concentration in stream water, because nobody had been up there in the capillaries of the landscape. So we were able to get almost a quarter of our sites are less than 1 square kilometer. What does that mean? That's a stream that probably wouldn't show up on your map. Mini maps certainly wouldn't have it. But our friends knew the landscape, and that's the value of working locally. So you have your blue line on your topo map, and there's twice as many lines that would be blue lines if you walked. And in an area like this, how many of your smaller, older streams in the older portions of Radnor are actually underground? And it doesn't become a stream until you go right to where it comes out. Our biggest spikes in Westchester come out from under the borough and under the university, and we've had seawater there. You can't measure it anywhere else because the rest of the time upstream of that, the stream is underground. You hear it, you walk over the storm drains, you'll hear it gurgling. But this was our goal, is to push into smaller watersheds, away from where USGS might have their sensors. It's too far downstream, too many municipalities, too far from where the salt is applied. When we looked at the old data and the new data where we had, in the TTF watershed, all of their sites were higher in January than their earlier samples. That was that storm event on Winter Salt Week. It was a snowy, sleety, nasty day, raining, salting like crazy because no one was sure if it was going to turn to just a sheet of ice. In the Westchester area, we had a bunch. Here you can see we had numbers going up in over 1,000 milligrams per liter. Remember, background is 5. Some of these may be tied to a salt shed. That's one thing you should always be aware of. Could be PennDOT, could be the municipality. Where's salt handled in high concentrations? Because there's trucks going in and out, there's waste going in and out, there's runoff from that pad for decades. So then I said, well, let's look at the watershed area. So I took 100 of the saltiest sites and compared them to the rest of the sites. So here's our 100 sites. What I see is a lot of smaller streams here versus larger streams over here. This is watershed area, this is salt. What does it mean? So among our salty streams, it's 400 versus 74. That's the median between the red and the blue. That's a big difference. Almost 6-fold. What's the size of the stream? 1 versus 10 square kilometers. So our saltiest sites tend to be smaller because that's where the land and the water are connecting. They call it, that's where the landscape leaks. So how much is staying? That's a question. We were sampling in January during a storm. we needed a base flow sample. We needed a sample that had nothing to do with road salt being applied, but rather was a reflection of groundwater coming out and forming the stream months later. The age of groundwater is really tricky. There's groundwater that's only days old, there's groundwater that's years old, there's groundwater that's decades old, and there's groundwaters that are centuries or tens of centuries old, being in confined beds. This was of interest to us. This is the newer stuff. This data set came out, I just found it about a month ago. This is out of the Chicago study. These are wells. They take data back to the 60s. So the first set of bars, 1960, 1970. These are wells in the Chicago area. Data points in the thousands. Shallow, 60 meters deep, 100 meters deep. So 300 feet deep versus 90 feet deep. 10 year, 10 year, 10 year, then 15 year and 15 years. So the newest data is 05 to 2021. Across all of their data, across months and stuff like that, you can see the increase over the decades. The neat thing was is they took a look only at the summer, the actual groundwater. Remember, shallow, deep. The shallow wells haven't been changing. In other words, they're flushing every year. The deep wells are accumulating just like Valley Creek. So every winter, we're taking a smidgen of our groundwater that's fresh and replacing it with salt water. And it's going deep and it's staying. And then we replace it again. It's not a shallow well problem, it's the migration of the salt water deeper and deeper. Just a natural process. It's older. But every year, more water goes in, more water goes out. So what's that do? It takes this thing, when we're sampling in, say, October, there's no surface runoff. Wastewater, these are 1 square kilometer watersheds. They're this big. They don't have a wastewater treatment plant on them. They're too small. They would be so dominated by the wastewater. So then it's really about groundwater. Some of our sites probably. So we went out in October and did another snapshot. And we were really lucky. We were able to push out past Lancaster City, out past Harrisburg, out down here into Adams County, out here to Altoona, up in the northwest. We even got started in Pittsburgh, and we're hoping to do even better out there. Because this conversation in Harrisburg has to include the west, the east, the south, and the north. It has to be not a Southeast PA problem. And there's no reason to assume it's not widespread. If you look at just the worst sites, this is above the EPA standard. Every one of our urban areas, we found something somewhere that passed. And that's without even, these guys out here have had very little opportunity. And my guess is we go to Chambersburg, we go into these smaller towns and rural PA, we'll also find it. One of the ways I know that is we have some sites up here off of the turnpike around Marsh Creek, around a convenience center. These are tiny streams. They get diluted out, but they were salty as heck when they got sampled because their main water recharge is coming off of the turnpike in the convenience center. If we go to the middle of the road, this is exceeding the Canadian standard. Everybody that had a red picked up a bunch of oranges. And then if we add in above the standard for Ohio and Maryland, every red, and then we start seeing State College, Altoona, Chambersburg. Remember, at 50, you're 10 times background. It's a lot of salt. At 100, you're 20 times background. So we're finding salt everywhere. If we throw it up, the thing with October is we had fewer sites, a smaller percentage that were super high, above the EPA standard. Still 5%. But here's the October data Here's the January data. It was 21% were above the EPA standard versus 5%. Remember, this is 1988, and Ron will tell you, in the regulatory world, 1988 is like the dinosaur era. There's so much more known, but it's also so complicated that as the feds have tried to revisit, more data comes in and they start over. And I don't envy their challenge. It's not easy. The standard for the Canadians from 2011. And if they revisited, they'd probably drop it down lower because there's more data now. But the bottom line is we found less, but still, lots and lots, 61% exceeded one or more of these standards in October. And we weren't picking sites other than just across the landscape, what's going on. When we lined them up side by side, this is the 1-to-1 ratio. If you're above 1-to-1, that means more in January than in October. Almost all of our sites were equal to or greater than we saw in October. So winter has more. Thing that rattled my cage, 40% were at least 50% higher than what we saw. So that it really runs high in the winter. What did we learn about the Schuylkill, the biggest watershed to you guys? We have a new mapping tool. I can pull the Schuylkill out. We have some holes in the data. You have non-Schuylkill like Lehigh over here. You have the Neshaminy over here. You Brandywine. You end up, our mean was 87 versus 5. Our max was 442. 68 sites were above 100. 112 sites were above 50 milligrams per liter. There's a lot of, and these are all urban areas. We're not going to get anything if we go all the way up to the headwaters. There's no hardscaping. That's okay. But there's also, these are volunteers helping us. This is the most recent data out of the Wissahickon, and they basically ended at the Montgomery County border just because they had a limited number of volunteers. But look at what they had. 150 was their average from the lower part of the watershed. Their max was only 224 though. They didn't have any sites below 70. Everybody registered high. 30 of their 30 sites were above 50, above that indicator. This is Valley Creek, Valley Forge TU, great partners. The mean's 136. I'm not surprised. A lot of salt in that 10. 362 though surprises me a little bit. There's so much hardscaping. But it's limestone, and I think it flushes like a toilet. It has the best flow through, relatively speaking, compared to many of our soils, many of our bedrocks. And so maybe it just doesn't build up as much. It's still there in a high number, I don't know. But 43 of the sites out of 48 were above 50. Every site was tenfold background. The neat thing is this showed us what limestone versus a freestone stream or a non-limestone stream. Valley is in blue, the red is Westchester. These guys are right, back to back almost. There was 155 microsiemens difference. This is geology. Limestone, non-limestone. Look at how consistent it is. But what else is there? No matter what, you have this additional conductivity that's road salt that's being added across both landscapes. But you need to be aware of geology. Pickering Creek, a drinking water watershed on the north side of Chester County. The mean was only 92. Only, I'd say, 92. The max, though, was 400. That was up here where Route 100 and the Turnpike interface. 22 of our 31 sites were above 50. Where were you guys at? And I'm no expert in your landscape, so I can tell you right now, I wish Lauren was here, and I was going to try to make sure Lauren McGrath knew about it. I'm sure she did, but this is a tough night to get out. Your mean was 144, that's a fair bit. Your max was just under 400. It's all up in here,
Yep.
that you know of.
Is that where we live?
Well, that's the high school and along the.
You have
river.
Villanova here. Now, our data that came out of Villanova, we didn't get chlorides out of them, so we don't know what's really going on here. This is not through the roof. I bet you if we went to every mainline city, because mainline runs a ridge, you know, you go to the north, and by the way, you don't have any data on the north side. I've forgotten, Guelph Creek, I think it is, up there. You might want to take a peek up there too, because road salt knows no boundaries. You
Yeah.
go over the hill, they're still gonna salt. Although Cabrini and Eastern might not be salting the way they were, certainly Cabrini's not.
Yeah.
But it's just something to keep in mind. There's nothing unexpected in this area. It's all very high.
Likely because of the Blue Route?
Likely because of people.
Yeah,
There's-
paving,
It's
paving, driveways, parking lots,
the
building.
difference
general.
between this area and like Westchester is my lot is 40 feet wide. So Westchester is much higher density.
Mhm.
That's what saves you, kinda, because you're still really high. And you haven't even started sampling those streams that are coming out from underground that are probably the saltiest of your sources. That's what we found. Go to those pipes. That's usually where it's highest. Go to where you know salt's being applied, the biggest parking lots, find the closest site. That's how you change the conversation, is you get those high numbers. They're not made up, and they're not an exaggeration, because if you try, you can find another one and another one. And that's the way it changes. There's been a lot of literature coming out. USGS back in the, it's probably about 2020, they published it with a correction in 23. They targeted the Delaware as a priority site for their pollution work, their research work. Some of that ended up being targeted on road salt. So some papers, 2023, 2025, legacy contamination, that was about road salt. Exceedance of ecological benchmarks, that was about road salt. Urbanization and winter weather on salinity, they ended up really focusing on our area on road salt. So there's good science coming out. Aqua has been sharing data with a professor at Villanova. Sodium and chloride in drinking water in the Philadelphia region. Temporal and spatial symptoms of salinization, rural to urban. That was the Upper Brandywine. This is a paper out of Canada, but I really like it. They had a single well, a municipal well, that then they tried to reduce road salt use around in what they called the 10-year circle of influence. They actually were able to measure a change in their well. Now, I don't know, they don't say how deep their well was. They don't tell me what they did other than reduction BMPs, best management practices, but they made a difference, and I found that positive for drinking water. One thing, yeah?
So, on the other side of this is the amount of salt, so, which somebody's buying it weighs something, so theoretically, you would think municipalities or whatever.
We'll get to
know
that.
how much, yeah, they're actually purchasing and using. And
Yeah,
it's
but
that
they
going up.
didn't, that's really hard to get for municipalities, but I'll
Okay.
get to that, because USGS has put together some budgets, but there's huge holes because they can't get this. Remember what I said, you're hijacking the water cycle with road salt, storm, groundwater. This started before we ever started doing major stormwater management. We basically put in pipes and said, get the stormwater out of here. That was all the way up until the late 90s, early 2000s. Then we started saying, well, we have to do infiltrated, do green stormwater infrastructure. Well, what's that do? We were already dumping salt, measuring increases in our groundwater before we ever started doing our stormwater management. Now what we're doing is we're forcing more and more of our surface runoff into the ground. That means that 50% of our road salt was going into the ground. The more we do this, the more salt's gonna go into the ground. No one's talked about this. Tied to that, there's now science coming out on this. Stormwater ponds, long-term surface and groundwater salinization. Stormwater management, transport of road salt. Stormwater ponds, this is about hazardous bacteria, HABs, cyanobacteria dominance. Road salt and heavy metals. Most people don't realize that the drinking water problem in Flint, Michigan, oh so many years ago, a decade at this point, that lead problem was a road salt problem. They switched water supplies from the Great Lakes, big dilute, no salt, to the Flint River, full of road salt. The road salt took the scaling off the pipes, then mobilized the lead. People have known about that stuff, so they put in anticorrosives. Flint, Michigan forgot to do that because they never had that problem. And but now people are paying attention, no matter how you're doing your stormwater, whether it's an infiltration pond or some infiltration trenches or whatever, people are paying more attention now. Because remember, one of the things is the road salt can also take the metals out of your pipes, copper and lead, but it can also take it out of the soil and mobilize it. But the most important thing, salt's not the worst thing in the world, and we're using it by the ton. It's a great way to start talking about pollution again. Because everybody knows they're part of the problem, and therefore they have to be part of the solution. Once they embrace there's a problem. But it's only here, because I put it at the top of the list. There are so many different kinds of emerging pollutants that end up in our urban water, either indirectly from runoff or directly through the wastewater treatment plants. These emerging contaminants are all factored in to the impairment of our waterway. But road salt is one that you can start the conversation. In 1972, we didn't need data to pass the Clean Water Act, because you could see it, you could smell it, you could see it, dead fish. You can't see road salt, you can't see herbicides, you can't see asphalt, sealants, you can't see the insecticides, the soaps, the personal care products, your pharmaceuticals, all these things going into our waterway. But maybe the gateway to the conversation can be salt, because everybody knows that they're part of that. And maybe that's how we get to some of these other more complicated things that really are expensive to sample. So now, there's a syndrome, freshwater salinization syndrome, but the funny thing is they reference it as part of the chemical cocktail that is our urban runoff. It's a smorgasbord of things, and we have to help people understand. If you put it on your asphalt, if you put it on your roof, if you put it on your driveway, if you put it on the front yard, if you put it on your playing fields, it's gonna end up in the water. That's just part of the water cycle. That's why I keep bringing the water cycle in. But why did we do this? It was about safety. It was about the economy. Winter storms cost time and money, and they make things dangerous. So we salt like crazy. It creates a convenience that now people expect, and they vote for it. They are paying for it. It's the problem we asked for and paid for year after year. What didn't happen in this conversation, this happened in the 70s, it happened again in the 90s. The environment, infrastructure, drinking water. They were completely out of the conversation when we decided to salt our environment. Every year, your municipality buys salt and never says, what are these hidden costs about? Nobody's helped them understand that. There are ways of doing better though. There are better plows. Guys in the Adirondacks cut their road salt use by 30% just by buying these live edge plows. The plow blade is split up. You calibrate your application every year so that you know how much you're applying, because most people apply way more than they need to. Brining, Maryland DOT cut their road salt use in half by brining right through the storm. Only about 10% of their road salt goes down as rock. The rest of it's brine. There are good examples online. Maryland, New York, Wisconsin, Minnesota, save money, still have the safety issues protected, and the environment, and the hidden cost to your infrastructure. They say that $100 worth of road salt, which is about a ton, causes $3,000 in infrastructure damage. That's mostly bridges and roads, and a little bit of our cars. So you go to the Giant or the Acme, go and look in wheel wells now, and you'll see corrosion that you haven't seen since the 80s. We solved it, but now it's caught up to us. So this is complicated. We ask for it, we pay for it. We're addicted to being able to drive like a bat out of hell in the middle of a snowstorm. And it took us years to get these problems that we're having. It's gonna take years to fix it. It's gonna require everybody being part of the conversation. There's no one to blame over somebody else. We're all part of the problem. So it's always, just like any of our pollution problems, it's about choices, about decisions. Planning for the future means making different choices, making different decisions. So take home, we use a lot of road salt, 55 billion pounds a year, twice what we did in 1990, 12 times what we did in before 1960. That's a lot of salt. So when someone joins one of these sampling events and they find a lot of salt, they're never surprised because they've been watching it get applied. It contaminates our drinking water, our streams and groundwater. It damages our infrastructure. The number I mentioned before, $100 worth of road salt causing at least $3,000 in infrastructure and private property damage. That doesn't include the environmental stuff or drinking water challenge. It's only gonna get worse. Because every year, we replace a little more of our fresh water with salt water down there in the ground. And it just goes up a little, goes up a little, goes up a little. But we can do better, and communities have done better. We're not gonna not use road salt, but we can slow down the increase and take the top off of the peaks. There's a whole group of people that are volunteering, working, they're advocates. I'm a scientist, I'm an educator, I'm a communicator, but I don't go ringing doorbells and doing petitions. These guys, you can Google them, PA Road Salt Action Group. There's a lot of information on their website. There's Winter Salt Week, which is going on right now. Free webinars, just sign up, you can go on. It'll happen again. It's organized out of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Saltwise does a great job on this. But it's people from all over the country, and they record them, so you can go see the ones that you've missed. We were gonna be sampling on Monday in Harrisburg. We're gonna now be sampling in March. But this is an effort to engage and educate our legislature. They just passed a House bill that just asked PennDOT to make sure that they focus on salt reduction BMPs in their training. If you want to know more about the Stroud Center, you can go to stroudcenter.org, subscribe, you can get our newsletter to find out what else is going on, things like that. That's what I have for you tonight. We're not bad in terms of schedule, got a little late start. I'll stay here as long as you guys want. Yes?
So, we have a second one. That's great. What about these alternatives that you can get at the hardware store that are supposedly not salt, but they're, I'm not exactly sure what they are, maybe calcium chloride by Dan?
They're all salts. They're just not table salt.
They
They're
do just as much damage?
different. But remember, by the ton, there's nothing you can drive up and down your roads and apply that's not gonna be a problem. However, for your neighborhood, for your dog, calcium carbonate's gonna be maybe a little more benign. Magnesium chloride and calcium chloride work at lower temperatures, so there's help there, but it's about being very careful with both of them, relative to sodium chloride, table salt. But none of them, there is no reasonably cost-effective alternative. We're just gonna have to use less. But that's where the mechanical removal and stuff like that comes into play, and abrasives. Think about when's the last time you bought snow tires?
Right.
That's us depending and trusting salt. And everybody moved to SUVs so they could go faster during the winter. It's about convenience and expectations too. That will eventually need to change. If I had you driving up and down your block with dirt, how many times did the salt truck go past your house in the last 2 days? 5, 6, 7?
Twice.
Twice, that's good.
Yeah, but,
Are-
you know, we're comparing, I grew up in Cleveland, so this is, a storm like this is not even considered a lot of snow. But any day, any road, you'd have the trucks going by your house 5 or 6 times during the course of a couple of hours. Here, I never see that.
Is your street clear now? Or
Street-
is it packed powder?
Yeah, the street's clear.
You're down to asphalt.
Yeah,
So there's, in all likelihood, better blades,
yeah.
maybe, or they might be using a hot shot or something like that, magnesium chloride. So it's been so cold, sodium chloride stops working at 20. Magnesium chloride goes much lower.
Yeah.
Magnesium chloride is more toxic to the aquatic environment though. So yours is an interesting observation because that's not what I saw in Westchester. And that's also the trick. Your guys knew to stop. Something told them we've done enough and they stopped. Whereas other places needed more and more, just depends.
Well, I'm saying plowing, not salting.
Oh, how
Not
many
salting,
salt trucks?
Plowing.
2 plows.
We were plowed twice. I'd say in an area where there's significant snow accumulation, you'd be plowed 5 or 6 times. You know.
Oh, sure.
by
But
now,
how many
which
times did
is-
the salt, did
you
salt
just
get
don't
applied?
need as much. They just don't need as much salt.
So how many times did you get salted?
Oh, I not watching that.
That's the
That's a good
trick.
question. Yeah.
So is there a standard? I've looked and have only found for domestic purposes, you know, for a driveway or sidewalk or something, an approximation of the amount of salt that is an appropriate amount. Because that, to me, is one of the major issues. It's completely obvious here that there's just huge chunks of it. I mean, just as
Right.
we walked in here tonight.
No.
It's not effective, and I literally have seen the
So-
township staff using leaf blowers to blow it into the gutter so that it is gonna go
That's
more
because
efficiently into
no
the
one told them
storm
not to.
drains. Yeah,
Right.
exactly, I appreciate that, and I mean, I wasn't beating up on anybody, but I was.
Some people are
appalled.
promote sweep and reuse.
Well, cleaning it up is one thing, but sweeping it into the storm drain
No,
is
I
entirely
mean picking it
different.
up and reusing it.
Yeah,
This is what you tend to see, like outside.
yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Some people say it's 1 crystal per 3 inches, every 3 inches, or 2 inches. I played around with 200 pounds per lane mile versus this application rate, this is out of Canada, versus they'd say a 12-ounce cup
Mhm.
on 10 sidewalk squares.
Right, that's what I found online.
They all average out to about the same 20 grams per meter squared, which was amazing to me. So then what it needs to look
Wait,
like
that's the
depends on the
piece.
size of your crystals. So I had a road salt pile in Pocopson Township. I took 80 pounds off it. The truck must have parked 2 or 3 years ago. I took a less than a quarter of this thing and I got 80 pounds. I mean, it was just a ton. But it allowed me to play around with real road salt from a township applicator. There's so much smaller stuff in there. It's really hard to describe what it should look like, because I think under normal winter applications, you wouldn't see it because there's already some snow and stuff down there.
Yeah.
These little things would disappear. So if you stay focused on the big ones, then 1 square foot is gonna have, 1 or 2 or 3 big ones, but probably a whole lot of smaller ones, to the point that I think there might be a small kernel every inch or so of road salt. That's what I was, because I've seen all these numbers you're talking about, and the funny thing is how much they overlap. 250 is not the highest road application, it's not the lowest road application. 250 pounds per lane mile, so that would be coming out of the PennDOT truck.
2 questions. You're applying salt before a storm to prevent the development of ice, correct? You apply it to the asphalt.
To prevent adhesion of the snow and ice.
That's the brine.
It's called de-icing, or anti-icing.
Anti-icing.
After the storm starts, it's called de-icing.
Okay, so you can do it both times.
And you can brine, that would be the primary recommendation. Remember, brine is only 23% salt.
Mhm.
So that's how Maryland reduced their salt use so much. The other thing is the brine goes down and it's a micron thick. Plow goes by, it doesn't remove it. The rock salt goes to the side, they have to reapply.
Right.
So that it's a more conservative technique. The problem is it hasn't ended up in the township hands, and it hasn't ended up at PennDOT. Maryland DOT, you can go online, you can find things written up about it. We have to get better guidance in this method. The guys in New York, I haven't seen them use it either. Now, it's colder, but they also have invested in better blades and cut their road salt. Now, if you're in the Adirondacks, and this is where the New York examples, they get a lot of snow. So it's not a minor challenge. It's more like Cleveland.
What do you think is the resistance against brine? Is that it's a completely different approach that they're not familiar with?
Funny thing is, a lot of people think brine is what's destroying your car.
Mhm.
I can't find any evidence of it. You know how they make brine? They take rock salt, put it in a tower, flush it with water, you get salty water out the bottom. You make your own brine out of road salt. It's sodium chloride. So how would the splash off of the road be any different than the brine applied?
Right.
In both cases, it's a salty liquid that sprays up into your wheels, into your brakes, into your wheel wells.
Mhm.
So I just think people are trying to figure out why they see rust now. And they think the biggest change is they see brining happening. What no one tells them is that they're actually using a lot more rock salt than they used to.
Mhm.
And they don't realize that brine is only 23% salt. It just comes out and then it dries and it's a white powder and you're like, oh, look at all the salt.
Mm.
But they apply, relatively speaking, way more rock salt per lane than brine.
Makes those decisions?
It's training.
Yeah, but
it's
then you have
recommendations.
people who are in charge and trucks and mounds of it, and who decides how often these trucks go out and,
And I would guess that that's at the municipal level.
Okay.
And they get initially trained by PennDOT.
okay.
They can go to other trainings too. We did a workshop with a group out of the Chesapeake.
Uh-huh.
That's part of their landscape certification program. And we targeted the municipalities in the Christina Basin, so the Brandywine. And we got 50 people showing up. the question is the blowback when you have less than optimal driving conditions. People have to understand about these hidden costs before they're going to accept the alternative of not salting the hell out of everything. Because if we don't do it now, it's gonna double in the next 20 years, and then it'll double again. You already, if you were on a low sodium diet, you'd have to be worried about where your water was coming from.
Right.
There are times in the winter where even this drinking water standard, which is 250, which is about taste as much as anything, the drinking water around here exceeds that because of the winter runoff.
Is there data? Do you have data?
It's published right
Yeah,
here.
Cruz and Rossi.
Cruz,
Okay.
Rossi, and Goldschmidt.
Okay.
And they just took it, I think, 3 locations, 3 different sources out of the spigot.
Is there impact on agriculture? I mean, Chester County is still a very agricultural county, and you would think that groundwater would be having an impact.
Well, white clay is your classic agricultural watershed. It's been farmed for 300 years. They don't have a
So
roadside.
that, not so much simply because they don't have the runoff.
They don't have the roads.
Yeah,
They don't have the
okay.
parking lots. Maybe very local, but not like we're seeing. This is an urban thing,
Yeah, okay.
or a transportation thing. And the thing that's so striking is those smart guys in the National Academy knew to ask that question in 1970, 2 years before the Clean Water Act. They asked the question, you think this road salt thing might be a problem? And then we ignored it, and we ignored it, and we ignored it again. And we still do, just so you know.
Well, you know how the hotels put out that sign, they say, we've decided not to give you fresh towels every day because of the effect on the environment, using the water. And we just said, okay. And then you what, call the desk if you need that fresh towel. Who does that? So why can't you get people, citizens, to then, rally the township to make an announcement? We're going to use less salt in our local environment because we don't want to be a burden to the groundwater. You just make an announcement and just wait for people to complain.
Come to a township council meeting and say exactly that.
Right.
It would be
Right.
extremely
It's-
helpful.
Because you're at the hotel, and who's gonna call the desk and say,
Part
oh,
of
I
it
need
here.
towels every day? No, you just accept it.
It's our township,
Yeah.
and I walk a lot.
Right.
And it is the sidewalks, it's what the township is putting on everything. It's way
Yes.
more than what the apartment
Right.
buildings are, or private business owners, or whatever. They're putting, it's just huge chunks. It's not melting anything. It's actually a hazard in its own right.
Yeah.
Stumbling across it.
We don't need fresh towels every day, and we don't need salt constantly.
So
Well-
it's a balance between those two, so.
It's
'cause
a
I
liability
appreciate
issue too.
All of it's an issue.
Oh, yeah, it's all
scared.
together.
That's why you said New Hampshire
That's
has
where
laws that limit,
New Hampshire is ahead of everybody
that's
on
right.
that front. But why is it that you can get in your car and trash your car and not look to sue anybody? You might even get injured in your winter car accident on the Schuylkill. You're not gonna say, who can I sue? You don't even have the assumption that there's someone to blame. You made that choice, you got in your car under bad conditions and you had an accident. It was an accident, it was not planned. You get in your car, drive to the parking lot, get out, have a slip and fall, and all of a sudden there is someone to blame for the exact same decision. There's someone to blame, someone to pay. Somehow we have to break that connection. Like I said, we're not gonna get rid of road salt, but if we can slow it down, it gives us some time to figure out other options. Someone said to me, isn't there, can't we remove it? Well, drinking water is one of the most sacred things in the world. What's the most expensive way of generating drinking water? Desalinization. You live in the arid parts of the world, you have to desalinate, and it's so energy consumptive.
Yeah.
That's not an easy answer, and it's certainly maybe not a cost-effective answer compared to changing expectations, doing better job with doing your efforts, just changing don't do what you did in 1990. Things have changed.
So I have another question, because I've read that Pennsylvania has more miles of waterway than any state except Alaska.
Yep,
And
85,000 miles of streams.
Right, and
roads,
so
too.
in some respects, it's a Pennsylvania issue very explicitly because of the amount of
Right.
springs and all those kinds of things, right? So I would imagine in some other places, it's not quite as an extreme an issue,
Right.
because there's literally not that much water running around.
And we have a lot of roads.
We have about 10% of our landscape is urban. That means 8,000 miles of stream, in all likelihood, that have a salt problem at one way, shape, or form, to
Right.
some degree.
But that's Pennsylvania, so
Yeah.
it'd be interesting to look at other places where there's not so much running water. Even appreciating some of it is under the urban areas. But, I mean, I'm suggesting it only because that might be one of the arguments that can be used, is that Pennsylvania has this exceptional situation that puts us particularly at risk, that means we need to be that much more vigilant. That's the only reason I'm suggesting it.
I'm open to anybody making any suggestions, because it's gonna take a lot of voices and a lot of ideas, but more than anything, it has to be kind of a general message that this needs to change. I think it's gonna be infrastructure and drinking water. I don't think that the environment's gonna wag this dog. I think it's gonna be about people recognizing that their drinking water is salty in the winter and that maybe they don't like that. It may be that an indicator that if I can taste the salt and measure the salt, what else is in there?
Yeah.
And being aware that anything you do to the landscape ends up in the waterway. And so it's gonna come from a lot of directions. I think we have a hard time maintaining the infrastructure we have today. What we do with salting is we're accelerating the aging process. So if it was expected to have a lifetime of 100 years, maybe now it only has a 50-year lifetime. The highway people know that this is aging, accelerating the aging of our infrastructure, but nobody's telling them not to do it.
Right,
What-
have sidewalks. as
What
well.
I've heard is they're mostly, all they get are complaints. Why isn't the road clear
Mhm.
earlier? Because I don't want to deal with slippery roads. I don't want to slow down. Oh, yeah, there is a salt lobby.
There you go, that's it.
I don't have any interaction with them, so I don't know how they
I know
behave.
I arrived an
Yeah.
hour late, but you don't represent the township, obviously.
No,
You are from.
Stroud Water Research Center, so I'm just a scientist.
Chester County.
Just.
I'm just a scientist who looks at streams.
Was there a handout?
No, but if you go to stroudcenter.org
Yeah.
/salt, you
Okay.
can find some of our information.
Okay.
We're working on some new things. If I get a grant or two here, you might see a display here in the library. Maybe I'll come to you guys. That's a
Yeah.
road salt display,
Wow.
Good.
that maybe will help you
When
guys.
we go to the hardware store.
Yeah.
We don't get salt, we get something that starts with the C.
Yeah,
You get
still
calcium
salt.
carbonate, or
Is that
calcium
as
chloride.
bad?
It's still a salt, it's just not sodium chloride.
You don't have to apply as much as sodium chloride, correct?
Some would say that. Again, if you look at it, it's manufactured into these pellets and stuff. So in some ways, it's easier to see. It's not a natural product, but it's way more expensive. And it's still a salt. It's still gonna be an osmotic challenge.
But it seems like it does take less,
And
not necessarily.
if you buy the Pet Safe, that's usually calcium chloride. If you buy Hot Shot, that's usually a magnesium chloride product. And you have to look at the bag and say what's in it, because some of these bags are actually these mixtures of things, or they're proprietary and you can't even find out what's in it. It's secret. But I guarantee it's some combination that includes lots of salt, because that's our only way. Even these acetate, so non-chloride driven things, are still a salt, and the environmental impact is still there. You can't put out tons of anything in a watershed and not expect it to have an environmental impact. I mean, there's just nothing that's neutral.
So what is your recommendation?
I mostly stay home.
Yeah,
No,
seriously, what is
it's
the
these right here. Mechanical removal,
Right.
trying
Salt
new things,
brine.
brining,
'Cause it's less.
and only apply what's recommended. Anybody who gets trained, they're told to, but that means you have to calibrate your machine
Yeah.
and you have to pay attention. PennDOT is to a large degree, does so much better than us. Their trucks are smart trucks with better plows, and they have a computer that's connected to a satellite that gives them weather reports, that's connected to ground sensors, to a regional weather system that tells them right here, right now, for the next hour, you apply in this mile, this much.
This is all PennDOT trucks, the whole fleet?
All the modern ones.
Oh, okay.
And but this whole network, it's in New Jersey, it's in Maryland, it's up in New York, but the municipalities don't have access to that information. I think that would be hugely helpful.
Information is what is needed, that's what
And
I
it-
found is difficult to find, other than this, a mug-size, cup of salt for 10, sidewalk blocks.
If you go online,
You know.
you can find this regional weather system that they're using to help the DOTs regulate their salt applications, do what's proper. There needs to be a push by the municipalities. My understanding is in PA, there are a few that get it under the table. They know somebody who knows somebody, sounds like PA.
Yeah, it does.
You're being
recorded.
Um,
No, Philly, sounds
Philly.
like Philly.
Tell me
That-
again,
that-
Stroud, what?
Stroud Water Research Center.
Okay.
That system, if we could get it modified, that gave real-time recommendations to the municipalities, even if it's a ballpark, it's more than they have right now. And why not? What would that hurt? They have the radar, they have the model, they have the in-ground sensors, and the truck sensors. The guys in New York, if you go online and look at one of those YouTube videos for the guys out of Lake George, you see this guy in the truck. He's got a smart truck, and that truck is telling him what to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And but
Fabulous.
that costs money,
Yeah.
and municipalities don't have
That's
that money,
right.
or they haven't planned
Right,
to have that money. So
Right.
it's gonna take a while.
right.
You can edit out all the bad stuff if you want. Don't get me in trouble.
Thank you so much, John.
We're democracy unfiltered.
Thank you.
What is the
Ah, that was
principal
great.
level of chloride in-
Sad, what is that blue stuff people use?
The
I hate
drinking
that
water
blue stuff
standard
that
is
I see
250.
everywhere.
milligrams?
That's salt,
Milligrams
and
per
what they
liter
do,
chloride, and
color
that's a
coded
taste
to let
test.
us know it's there.
That's
You know, I
potability.
hate that.
There is no, in PA, there is no aquatic
I
life.
do,
Terrible.
but not.
So that's why people rely on the EAC standard, which is 230, or the drinking water standard.
Yeah, so we measure salt when it gets into the GSI, the Green Stormwater System.
Without naming names, my understanding is, because the salt in the water can be a problem,
A lot of people understand.
hospitals get notified when the slug's coming through, because it messes up their dialysis machines. And they switch to, RO units and stuff to keep their dialysis machines running during heavy salt events and stuff. People know about it, and I have no desire to be the one that criticizes the drinking water providers. This is like PFAS. It's a problem they didn't, it's not of their creation.
No.
And I don't wanna be the one that says our drinking water providers are not doing their job, or drinking water's unsafe.
I agree with you.
Cause then people go buy, bottled water at $10 a gallon,
Yeah.
which is so not cost effective. Then you worry about plastics and other things, but
Well, and it's groundwater unless it's distilled, and that still has PFAS.
And, well, and the other thing is, it's, you lose, public resources have a unifying force to communities. When we recognize that it all belongs to us, we're more likely to work together to protect we. Buying your own bottled water kind of is isolating.
You know, we.
I can do it without,
And they already did.
and that doesn't help us, not in the long run. We're better when we work together.
But I'll talk with Carol tomorrow.
A lot of
Early,
us.
early
Yeah.
March. And then, like you said, it might be visited.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
February.
Um,
Yeah.
Glad to be here.